Welcome everyone to the Wealthy Life Club Master Class. I'm Sybil Verch, host of The Wealthy Life. Today's session is how to get promoted. If you are keen on taking new challenges, growing your career, and increasing your earning potential, you are in the right place. Our 30-minute master classes are designed to educate and empower you to make smart decisions, make the most out of what you have, and live your version of the wealthy life. Today's session is all about getting promoted. Whether you have your eyes on the C-suite, a senior leadership role, or maybe you just want to take your career to that next level, this session's for you. We'll cover common mistakes people make and how to avoid them, and the 3 things you can do immediately to ensure you are well positioned for a promotion. If you have a question you would like answered during the session, please enter it in either the chat or the Q&A boxes down below. We'll do our best to answer as many questions as we can. So now I am pleased to introduce Heather Christie, an executive leadership coach, professional speaker, author, and recovering attorney. I love that.
Me too.
Former legislative and regulatory attorney. She was a partner in a prestigious 100 attorney Chicago law firm. Heather works primarily with CEOs, executive leadership teams, and boards of directors on influencing change. She is consistently ranked as one of the top coaches in the world. We're so glad to have you here today. So Heather, welcome. Thanks for being with us. And let's kick this off. As we're talking about promotion, why do people want to get promoted in the first place? And is there some good reasons to want a promotion and maybe some not so good reasons?
Well, that's a really great question to start off with. And I think that's a question that each person should be asking themselves, because until you really determine the why, you can't figure out whether that why is truly aligned with what makes sense. So let's just talk about that. When you think about why most people might want to get promoted, you might be surprised to learn that it's not just for the title or not just for the pay increase or the prestige of it all, but also because they see the opportunity to really advance the organization or to develop a team or to work cross-functionally or at an enterprise level. So it would be really a great exercise at a starting point to say, what are my true drivers? Because there's no question about it. I've run into executives that have taken that promotion to the highest levels, right into the chief levels, where they find that the complexity has in fact increased quite a bit. So you really want to make sure that you know what you're after.
I think being a former executive myself, I saw different people wanting promotions for different reasons, and some of them were not so good. There was the occasional case where people were just chasing a title or an image and not really having the passion behind it to really do well at that job. And maybe you're chasing the wrong fit for themselves. So I think being honest with yourself and really digging deep is fantastic advice.
Yeah, I can tell you, Sybil, that when you ask that question, the first thing that I think about is we have this set of very individualized drivers, each of us do. And most of those are hidden from view, and not everybody is in touch with them. In fact, most people that I've come across are not really aware of the combination of values, really, that drive them to take action. Most oftentimes what drives someone to go for a promotion has to do with what they value. And you're right, depending on what they value, it could take them down a path that maybe is not fully aligned with what they want to have. So it's a great place to start.
Well, I'm going to assume that everyone listening today has their values clearly aligned and they're ready to be promoted. And maybe they've been trying for some time and haven't had success, or maybe this is a new thought. Either way, what are some of the common mistakes you see people making?
So I love starting off with the mistakes. And of course, if you think about the mistakes, on the other side of that are the opportunities, right? So I'm going to save some of the opportunities for later. But some of the mistakes that I see are that oftentimes people think, well, I'm so good at my job now, right? I'm so skilled. I've been doing this for a long time, as though, the time factor really plays into it. But a lot of focus on me and what I've contributed. And when you think about promotions, especially the highest level of leadership, it switches from a me to a we, right? So instead of being so focused on what I've done or what I've contributed, start thinking about the expansion of how have you contributed to the organization? How have you developed those around you? It's one of the biggest missings, right? Is when you have a leader and they've been too focused on how they've grown, but maybe not enough attention on how they've grown others around them. So that's one of the pitfalls. The other one is EQ, not just IQ, right? So EQ, emotional quotient or emotional intelligence. We see a lot that when it comes to the highest levels of leadership, it's not always the smartest person who gets that role or the person who's been there long enough. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard about, this new person came in and they got promoted and I've been here for so long. I'm really good at what I do. I have all this knowledge and all this skill. So there's, the emotional intelligence piece is how you're able to communicate, connect, build relationships, not just with those in your department, but cross-functionally too.
Yes.
Yeah. So those are a couple big ones. I would say the other thing is a really big thing at the highest senior levels is your ability to think strategically versus operationally. So if the
Good one.
focus is on what I've done, how I've executed operationally, that's great. And I would say if you're looking for that promotion, start thinking bigger picture. Start thinking about how you contribute to the overall big picture, long-term goals of the organization, not just executing on projects or individual contributor types of things.
I think that's a big one because I think back early stages of my own career, I'm a doer and I'm very task oriented and I get things done. So I can deliver. But as you step up, you need to think outside the day-to-day micro and you need to think more macro. And I think sometimes people struggle with that somewhat. So just because you are really good at delivering in a particular role doesn't mean necessarily that those same skills are going to be effective leading a team of doers. So there's
Absolutely true. And Sybil, you make a good point here. If you are a doer, and you might even say those who are the super doers, right? The really high achievers tend to be very, very action oriented. And when you as an individual are that high achiever, how does that translate then to building that team, bringing that team along, making sure that the people who work with and for you are, being delegated the kinds of things that give them the opportunity for growth,
yes.
right? We've probably even talked about this before. The people who are the super doers tend to struggle with that delegation, in part because the appearance is, well, I certainly could hand that off, but people on my team are really busy. I don't want to bother them with that. Or I would love to hand this off, but the reality is it would take me so long to describe how to do this task. And even if I did hand it off, chances are really good when it comes back, I'm going to have to fix it and redo it anyway. So it'd be just a lot faster if I could just do the thing. So there's so many excuses as leaders that we might come up with. We might have really good reasons for coming up with these excuses, but those are sort of the hidden limitations that are blind spots for people that will keep them right where they are, right? And so oftentimes things will come out in feedback sessions or maybe more formal 360s. And if you ignore the feedback that's coming your way, if you're not taking specific action and making those adaptations, then that will be noticed as well.
You see this a lot in sales industries where you may have top performing salespeople that then get promoted into management because look how great they are at selling cars or houses or widgets or whatever. But as soon as they get into leadership, that's not their skill set, or it may not be their skill set. And so it is a transition there. That's a really good point to be aware of.
Yeah. Yeah. It may not be their natural skill set.
Right.
And what's really interesting is I've had people say, like, is there such a thing as a natural born leader? And the answer is, of course, we all are. We all have natural strengths that we can tap into, but how familiar you are with yourself makes a massive difference, right? Because we all have these innate strengths that until we really understand them and get intentional about developing them, they otherwise just kind of show up and we use them when we bump into them and we're good at them. So I think that's the other piece of it is, know thyself. And the more you tap into who you truly are and the skills that you have. So as in that salesperson example is a great one. Salespeople tend to be, extraordinary with connecting with others, right? So, and that's also a great leadership skill, but it's a little different, right? The sales connecting with others versus the leadership connecting with others. So you can tap into it, but still probably need to develop that.
Right. And developing it, how do people develop it?
Well, that's a great question. It starts with awareness, right? Everything starts with awareness. You've got to know what your top skills are. And I would suggest that you find that out not only from the internal assessment that you can take, right? So there are really, really good quality assessments that will shortcut your path to understanding yourself. But the other thing is asking for feedback, right? Finding out from others around you, what do you see as my top strengths? How do those show up? Like really doing an assessment. So how do you develop that? Well, that takes an intentional effort. There are so many different avenues these days, everything from the podcasts that are out there, books, of course, have always been a great go-to. But even having conversations with people around you and your leaders or mentors in your industry and asking them, what are the next steps? What are the skills that I need to develop to go to this next level in my career?
Yeah, well, I love, and I don't mind sharing this quick little story with the group here, but I worked with you and that's how we connected. Is I was at a stage in my career where I was looking at taking my leadership style to the next level and finding out what blind spots I maybe had. And what that included was this 360 that, for those of you who haven't heard that term before, it's really just having someone, a third party, so in this case it was you, Heather, that reached out to individuals that worked with me, either above me, beside me, below me in terms of reporting lines, and gathering feedback on very specific things so that you could take that and coach me on how others perceive me and the areas that I may want to work on. So that really heightened the awareness. I can't tell you how valuable that was. It was just such a great experience. As I say, great experience at the beginning, you have to be prepared. You're going to hear some things that maybe are hard to hear because you hear constructive criticism. But if you can get over that and know it's for the good, it is for the good, and it's so beneficial.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think taking that 360, like I think about the person who wants coaching, and then that whole group of people around them. In your case, we did what's called stakeholder feedback, where you actually requested this feedback from others and said, "Hey, I'm looking to continue and develop my leadership capabilities, and I'd really love your feedback." That's step one, right? Is making that request, asking for that feedback. And I think we may have, as a society generally, just a resistance to hear the things we don't want to hear, right? To go into that natural sort of defensive mode when it comes feedback time. And of course, as you know, we've in most organizations, the time that feedback is received is generally the annual performance review, the dreaded annual performance review. For most leaders dread them just because of how consuming the time is and people receiving them. How do you receive that feedback? Well, the mindset that you go in with for receiving feedback is so critical. And thinking about it as a gift, because that's what feedback is it's truly a gift. And even though you hear something at first, it might sting because you have a different perception, of course, that, oh, I don't think I'm doing that thing. Or what about all these great things that I'm doing? Don't they see that? The answer is, the reason I think feedback is always so valuable is it gives us that insight. It's kind of a mirror, right? Of how other people see us, so that we can finally see ourselves in that way. don't you want to know so that you can
Yes.
make changes, right?
You can't fix what you don't know is
You,
broken. And it
you,
doesn't necessarily mean it's broken. But if you ask for feedback, I would assume that you are then generally ready and want to hear the feedback so you can be even better,
yeah,
which kind of segues nicely into some of the tips that you have
yeah,
for us today.
it
So
does for sure.
let's talk about what are the three things that people need to do to make sure they get those promotion opportunities.
So when you and I first had this conversation talking about doing this podcast, I had three things that just came to me immediately as you were asking. The very first thing was ask. And what I mean by ask is if you're not making it known that you want to have this promotion, right? That you're interested in advancing your career, that you're interested in taking not only your career to the next level, but taking your contribution to the organization to the next level. If you're not asking, if you're not informing people that that's what's next for you, that that's what your desire is, it's a missed opportunity, right? And I think you have even had that at some
Oh,
point in your career where
I did.
you forgot to tell someone,
Early
right?
on at a previous firm that I worked for, the manager was retiring and I wanted the management role. And I'd already been doing so much of the work within the branch, within the office, added tremendous value. I was the doer. Um, but I made a huge mistake and I learned it afterwards, but I forgot to let the people who were hiring know I wanted the job. I took for granted and assumed that just because I was doing good work, others
Mhm.
knew about it. And that was just such a valuable lesson for me early on in my career. And
Yeah.
so I always tell people now, and that's actually part of the inspiration for the book I wrote, The
Yeah.
Female Edge, was make people know, like put it out there, raise your
Yeah.
hand and let
Mhm.
people know that you do want it because they won't automatically know.
They don't automatically assume, right? And because here's an interesting fact. There are people out there who actually don't want the next promotion.
Yeah.
Now, as a high achiever, you'd never think that, right? You'd think everybody's always out for the promotion. That's not true. Some people don't want that next promotion. So,
Yeah.
so ask, share your ambitions. And part of that inquiry is asking your boss or those around you who really matter, what do you see as the next steps in my career? What skills do you think I need to develop? So you're really, you know, not only asking for that next level, but you're starting to ask some additional questions. Get curious, get interested, show that this really matters.
I've got a little sidebar note here because I think there's a lot of individuals, and maybe women in particular, the studies show that women tend to only apply for promotions or apply for positions if they have all the prerequisites, where men are more likely to apply with very few. And so that may hold some people back from even asking or putting their hand up, or maybe they don't even know. So I would encourage people out there to really think about, don't limit yourself, and you can still have those conversations and ask those questions, with your superiors on, hey, what potentially could be next for me, and
Yeah.
learn what it is. And it can open your mind and create opportunities maybe you yourself hadn't even thought of.
Absolutely. There could be a next level that you're not even aware of, or your boss might see some skills in you, some opportunities for you that hadn't been a thought. You're
Yes.
absolutely right about that. Yeah. So
Great.
number one is that. Number two, we already talked about a little bit, which is seek feedback, right? Whether you go through a formal process with a coach and do a formal 360, which is an amazing process for feedback, or whether you actually just take it upon yourself to go make it your mission to find out everything you can about the perspective of others and what's showing up for you. So when I do stakeholder feedback, we ask three different questions. I use the Marshall Goldsmith model, which I think is just amazing. The three questions are: number one, what is Sybil doing well, right? Where does she shine, right? Number two, what behavior change do you think would make the biggest impact for Sybil? And number three is, what specific suggestions do you have for her? Right. So you're finding out what's working, what's not working, and what are some specific examples of how it could look? What would that change look like? But what's really interesting in the stakeholder feedback process when you gather that information is that you're also asking people to get involved and be on your team and be on the lookout for the change that you're looking to make. So when that feedback is received, you actually make the statement. You say, here's what I'm going to work on. Here's what I'm committed to. Would you support me in that? And the directive is for the people around you to truly be looking for the changes you're making. Now, that serves for a really important reason. You could be working really hard on your own, just making changes, doing the things that you think are valuable. Those could be lost or missed because people are so busy and consumed with what they're doing. They're not on the lookout for the great changes that you're making. So that's why having that formal process is hugely valuable, because it's not just one person going through the change. We're also looking to change perceptions of those around you.
Brilliant.
So that's a huge aspect. It works. When somebody's really committed, it works, it works, it works.
And then you've
Yeah.
got those people around you that were providing feedback, supporting you. They want
They're on your team. They're cheering you on. Yeah.
Yes.
And they're loving when they love what they see and they share it with you. They feel like they're kind of taking a part, but also they're respecting the fact that you've asked them. So you're building trust, which is the foundation for every relationship, right? So it's all like, it's magic how that all works together.
Great.
And then the number 3 tip that I would give is really about your mindset. It's about doing more than just your job, right? It's not just about doing great work. It's about expanding into things that are bigger than just your department, bigger than just your team. So when I think about doing more than your job, I think about, volunteering for projects that are maybe enterprise-wide projects, right? Showing that you care about the bigger picture, about the longer term goals. So it's going over and above. It's thinking about working on a development plan. It's reading books, listening to podcasts, like really going to seminars, getting a coach, right? Really working on being better, working on your own personal and professional growth.
And shouldn't we always be doing that in life anyways?
Always be doing it. But sometimes we get busy and we get stuck in that day to day. And so it's really like when you're ready for that promotion comes.
Yeah.
So if the promotion hasn't come, it just means there's something missing. Go get it. Go and get it. Make it a priority. Figure out what it is for you. Go on a growth path. Go on a streak. Get people to support you. I think it's, I love this conversation because it's when people get super intentional about making those changes that's when that promotion really becomes earned.
Well, I know from flipping it a little bit, in an executive role, part of my job was to spot talent as well, and you ask around and you see, shining stars scattered around the organization, but how do you see what they really can do? And giving them opportunities for extra projects is a great way to see what they can do. But I'll tell you, those that raise their hand and offer to go above and beyond and proactively seek new challenges, they stand out above the rest. Absolutely. And so, right or wrong, in many organizations, those tend to be the people who do get the promotions. There might be other people in the organization that are equally or even more qualified and would do a fabulous job. But again, if you don't know about it, they haven't asked, they're not on your radar, they haven't sought out feedback, and they're not proactively going above and beyond, they get missed.
They do. It's too easy to have that happen. And you make me think about one of my favorite audio recordings from, it's probably from the 50s, Earl Nightingale, The Strangest Secret. Like to this day, I hear that guy's voice and I hear his message and he talks about going above and beyond. And it's still just such a powerful message.
Well, that's fantastic. So Heather, if people want more information, I've got 2 questions for you. Number 1, are there any books that you would recommend people read right out of the gate that pops to mind?
Sure. I'll give you my 2 favorite. First, Marshall Goldsmith's What Got You Here Won't Get You There.
Excellent.
Like just in the title, that's going to be a good book.
Yeah.
Number 2, I love John Maxwell's 5 Levels of Leadership. He's got it's an easy read and really eye-opening when you think about what those 5 levels are as he describes them. Those are my 2.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I think people love an opportunity to learn more and they can put this into practice. And if people want to get in touch with you directly, and learn more about your coaching services, which I don't know if you've got capacity or not, what are your thoughts?
Well, I would say if you have an interest in coaching specifically around executive development, executive presence, you want to go to that next level, shoot me an email. You can reach me at heather@evolveglobal.com. I have some, entry level kinds of things, starting with an assessment, getting to know you and how to read that report, how to make sense of it, all the way through into individual coaching like you and I did.
Fantastic. Heather, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. It's much appreciated.
Thank you,
And
Sybil. And what about the people? So I know
yeah,
some of my people are going to be watching this and they don't know Sybil Verch yet. So how can they get in touch with you?
yeah, so Sybil Verch wears actually two hats. So today we're here with my host of the Wealthy Life hat on. You can go to thewealthylife.com. There's all kinds of resources there to help you make the most out of what you have financially and live your version of the wealthy life. And then my other hat is Wealthy Life Group at Raymond James, where I'm a senior wealth advisor. And that's wealthylifegroup.com.
Thank you for
And
that.
I'd like to know from those of you listening, what would you like us to cover in a future master class? Just send us a message. We love hearing from you, your friends, your family. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter. I don't know how people keep up with all these things, but it's a great way to keep in touch and keep informed.
It
So
is.
thank you all for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Heather.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Sybil.